When it comes to cruising, you actually have to be extremely careful. There are some things that seem harmless, common even, that leave you standing at the port while your ship sails away without you. Now, I've seen it happen, and I've actually felt second-hand panic watching people just like you get denied boarding for something they had no idea was wrong, which seems harsh. So today I'm diving into 9 ways that you can be denied boarding in 2025, and more importantly, how to avoid each one. But you won't believe how easily they can sneak up on you, and they're actually affecting a lot of smart cruisers that I've never seen before. So let's start with a mistake that I've seen way too many people make. Now, this one feels like a no-brainer until it's you standing at the wrong side of the passport desk with a missing visa or wrong passport. Now, I've watched a family recently get denied at a European port last year, and well, the issue? Their passport expired 5 months after the cruise and not 6. That's it, 1 month short. And they had no idea. The cruise line didn't warn them, the travel agent didn't warn them, just a cold hard no. Now, you might also need a visa waiver for some European stops now, even if you're just getting off the ship for a few hours. But here's the twist, it's your responsibility and not the cruise lines. You need to double check requirements for every country on your itinerary. And if something looks like it could cause a problem, just fix it early. It's the best thing to do. Now, this next point hurts a lot from a crew perspective because it's actually really avoidable. Cruise ships have harsh deadlines. If they say boarding closes at 3:30, they mean 3:30. One couple I've spoke to actually saw the ship while they were running towards the terminal, but they were just still denied boarding. The security doors were shut, the dock was empty, and the crews were just sailing without them. And the worst part, it wasn't their fault. Their flight was delayed. So here's the golden rule. Arrive the day before the cruise, if you're flying. Or if you can't, give yourself hours of buffer time. Cruise lines don't wait, and trust me, I've seen it happen. And the best place to wait is the terminal coffee shop, because it's a much better place to waste 2 hours than the airport bar crying into your unused luggage tags. Now, here's where things actually get, I suppose, really frustrating, because one of the main reasons people are denied boarding is actually, I'd say, really unfair. But in order to understand why it's so unfair and why the cruise line does this, you first need to understand this next point. Now, this one does seem really reasonable, and I also agree, until you realise how strict it's gotten. So in 2025, some cruise lines are still running health checks at the terminal before you board. You're going to be given out a form to fill asking if you've had a cough, a fever, or even a stomach bug recently. And if you tick the wrong box, even by accident, you might be flagged. And if you look visibly unwell, such as sweating, sniffling, or even just tired, well, maybe not that last one because that's me over time working on board, but security can actually pull you aside and bring in the onboard nurse, and they will assess whether you're allowed or you're fit to travel. And I remember once a man was turned away just because of a lingering cough he'd got over weeks prior, and he just didn't feel sick anymore, but the cruise line's logic was, we just can't take the risk. However, this was closer to the time of the C word, which is understandable. Why would the cruise line take a risk at that time? But what should you do instead? Well, even if you're slightly under the weather, I would just consider calling the cruise line in advance, explain the situation, and just ask about your options, because showing up sick or just looking like you're sick could cost you the whole trip, which could easily be sorted out with just one phone call. Now, so far, all these points have been about what you've forgotten to do. But this next mistake is about something that you would have actively done without realising it. And it could actually completely backfire and ruin your entire ship before you even start your cruise. But what is it? So it's probably something that you shouldn't have packed. Now, I'm not talking about packing explosives or anything wild. I'm talking about common household items, maybe a power strip, a bottle of CBD oil, or just a bottle of wine. These are common items and they are banned. One guy in line that I've seen recently had a vape pen in his backpack. Totally legal where he lived, totally normal, but a security dog flagged his bag, and he didn't make it onto the ship until several hours later due to other searches that took place. But I suppose That's not even the worst part. Even prescription medication can be a huge problem if it's not declared properly, or if it's on a banned import list at one of the ports that you travel to. And I suppose the shit bit is you don't even need to be carrying it, but if the scent is still in your bag from previous trips, dogs can pick this up. Now this is obviously very, very extreme and also very rare. And within the 6 years that I've been working on cruise ships, I've seen sniffer dogs in the cruise terminal maybe once or twice. So just before you pack, check your cruise line's restricted items list. And if you're unsure, just leave it out. It's definitely not worth the risk. Because there was one time that I was coming off the ship in Singapore and I was pulled aside for questioning for a bottle of gin, which is just not what you want. Now this next one is something that no one wants to believe, but it does happen. There was a woman at check-in last year whose luggage was overweight, very common problem. She snapped at the person behind the desk and then it escalated with security. Now it did get a bit violent. She didn't just get a warning, she got denied boarding to her entire cruise. Cruise lines aren't just assessing your documents when you come into the terminal. They're watching you, so if you show up intoxicated, argumentative or extremely aggressive, especially towards staff or your fellow passengers, you could be labelled a safety risk. Even if you calm down later, sometimes that decision's already been made. So just remember, your cruise starts the moment that you're entering the cruise terminal and not when you step on board. And I've seen I've seen some passengers have full-on brawls in the terminal just for bringing something they thought was allowed, and they had an uproar about it. Now you might be sat there thinking, well, I'd never make those mistakes. You're probably right, but these next few points are the kind that sneak up on everyone. Not just because people are careless, but just because people didn't know the rules had changed, which is fair enough. Now this next point, I'd say is one of the most brutal ones because most people probably thought they've done this thing. Now, I met a man who swore his cruise was fully paid for. He had a confirmation email, he'd picked his cabin, but a payment had apparently bounced a month before and the system was showing an unpaid balance. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why can they just get him on board and pay for it? Well, the cruise line's policy, they're probably thinking if it bounced once, it could bounce again. So even if you had a previous cruise, like a drinks bill you didn't realise wasn't covered, your account could be flagged and cruise lines won't fix it at the terminal. So always log in at least a week before or a couple of days before your trip and check for any balances, even a small one. And even if you're using a travel agent to book stuff, make sure you confirm everything twice. Now this does change and has changed recently since I've been working on board, and some cruise lines, even if you've got a balance payment of a couple of pence, or the cruise ship actually owes you money if you didn't use an onboard account spending, you could be not allowed off the ship until you've sorted that. And I've seen some passengers be owed 5, 6, even pounds or even a couple of pence. They're not allowed off the ship because the cruise line owes you money. Passengers are like, oh, just keep it. They're not allowed. The cruise ship isn't allowed. You have to go to reception and sort it out. And especially on debarkation day, reception is a big queue. So make sure days before you finish your trip, double check your account. But cruise lines are actually particularly strict about this one, and I suppose for a valid reason. But if you're around 24 weeks pregnant on any day of the cruise, you could be denied boarding. They could ask for a documentation, and apparently if there's no, you could have no cruise. And it's the same for babies. Some itineraries of the cruise won't allow infants of under 6 months or under. I suppose this is if there's any medical issues while they're on board. The medical team has got basic supplies, but it doesn't want to be held responsible if anything goes wrong with your pregnancy or an infant. Now, I've heard that some passengers just show up thinking, oh, close enough, only just to be turned away at the terminal. So if you're travelling while pregnant, or even with little ones, please check your cruise line's policy before you book. Sometimes there's no exceptions, no sympathy, just a firm, I suppose heartbreaking no. Now this is just a general rule, but if you are travelling while being pregnant, I would say it's 100% worth calling your cruise line and just checking the policies, because no one wants to be denied a cruise for being pregnant. Super strict. Now this next one, it's the one most people, I suppose, never see coming, because you might actually be on a list that you didn't realise you were already on. Now this isn't going to be for everyone, but it's a good one to, I suppose, listen out for, because cruise lines actually track behaviour on each cruise line. If you were kicked off a ship in the past, you were flagged for bad conduct or even rude repeated phone calls or aggravated behaviour on the ships can actually quietly blacklist or ban you. You won't be notified and you'll show up at your next port and just be told no. And by then I suppose it's just too late to fix. So if you've had past issues, even small ones, on board the cruise, reach out to the cruise line before you book again, because what happens behind the scenes can actually stop you from ever getting back on board again. This is obviously cruise line to cruise line will be different, but if you are doing bad behaviour, I would just question yourself, why are you making it harder for workers? Just don't do that. Now, I've not actually seen this myself, but I've actually heard that one woman was flagged of a prescription cream she'd packed in her carry-on. Totally legal, she just didn't declare it, and security dogs picked it up. Now you might be thinking, well, that seems extreme, and honestly, it is. And if you're sat there wondering, what can I and can't I bring on a next cruise? Don't guess, just watch this next video on the new banned cruise items, and it's going to save you a ton of stress.